Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty Roundtable Radio Talk Show.
Check out these names, ladies and gentlemen. James Edwards, thepoliticalcesspool.org. Hunter Biden, Nick Fuentes, Patrick Byrne, Donald J. Trump, Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell, J.D. Vance, AOC. Welcome to the broadcast, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Sam Bushman, and we're going to kick it off with hard-hitting news the networks refuse to use. We're skipping all breaks today. No holds barred. Tell the truth. Get it done. Broadcast. News the networks refuse to use. James Edwards, welcome, my friend.
It's going to be like an NBA player going the full 48 minutes today, Sam. I'm excited about it. Always more news than we can get to in an hour with or without the breaks. And, of course, all the news the networks refuse to use right here on the Liberty News Radio Network. Great to be with you today, Sam.
All right. We saw this interesting, I don't know if you call it an alliance, because they sat down together. Both kind of wanted an interview with the other. Nick Fuentes always getting in unique situations. But Hunter Biden, Nick Fuentes hold explosive Philadelphia hotel interview. I guess it almost turned into blows, they're saying, James.
Well, that's what they're saying, and it's I don't quite understand Hunter Biden's angle in all of this and his rehabilitation
I do. I'll
tour.
tell you about it in a second.
Well, it was interesting, I think, that I first heard about this from TMZ, which definitely makes sense considering that this is a spectacle. And above all things, Nick Fuentes is an entertainer. It's not to say that he is not a gifted orator. He is, and he does have a good understanding of political situations, but he does do a lot of things for attention. And he actually came and spoke at one of the conferences I put together in 2019 in Chattanooga, actually. And so, of course, I've followed him from a distance and know who he is. And actually, when one of his events got canceled a couple of years ago in Detroit, being who he is, he had trouble getting an attorney. And I put him in touch with my attorney, with who represented me in my libel suit. And I think that that's still going forward 2 years later with what they're working on. So,
well, interesting twist. You know, they're both attention seekers. The unusual meeting between what they call two high-profile and deeply polarizing figures has generated significant online attention. And everybody's debating on what the, transpire really means. In other words, what really happened and all that kind of stuff. But here's what's interesting in my opinion. I believe that Hunter Biden is trying to figure out how he can keep the Biden family in the news and popular. And he's got to do something because right now his father's disgraced, melting down. He's been disgraced, melting down. Jill doesn't have a prayer because she's a clown. And now what are we going to do for the Biden family? We got to keep the legacy alive somehow. And so I believe that Hunter is trying to get in the news. And he believes that Nick Fuentes can get him there. And I believe that's probably true. Now, Nick is very well known, showing up at unique places. What's fascinating to me is this. When you and I do something, the mainstream press tries to ignore it, James. And then they try to attack us on the back end because they know they can't take us head on. When it comes to Nick Fuentes or some of these people, Hunter Biden, they're willing to cover them. Really, this would be a non-story. Who cares if they meet? There was nothing there except for an explosive, almost go-to-blows fight. Nothing came out of it in terms of policy or advancing one agenda or a partnership or anything that has any validity or productivity to it. It's just, hey, they got together for an interview. It was really weird. There was a possible almost fight. No one knows what they meant about. But, wow, that's top news. What on earth does that even mean, James?
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because certainly, just to give another comparable example, nobody was covering breathlessly when we were talking with Tulsi Gabbard a couple of years ago in Memphis. You'll remember that meeting.
Yes, sir.
At the Freedom
We got
Fest.
our photo taken with her and everything.
But it is random, seemingly random and arbitrary how these things fall out.
What they love is the clown show. When you bring solutions to the table or you can defend yourself in productive ways, they don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. What they want is the salacious without defense so that it can just go viral. They can basically take the news to the next cycle. But really, what came out of this meeting of any value? Anything?
No, well, see, that's the thing. And
Anything at all?
The key word there was seemingly random, and it only seems that way. There is a method to what the media does and when they choose to do it and why. I was just this last week, since we last talked, Sam, banned from Twitter for a second time. So it is interesting that people like, since we're talking about Fuentes, he's still on Twitter. Who is allowed to be on Twitter? Who is allowed to be on social media? Who is allowed to do things and who is not allowed to do things? And one of our friends had a good comment because people were commenting on my ban this week, and he said that the Elon Musk's free speech platform has an exception for people who are accomplishing things in real life. And
that's the point. I mean, what has Nick really accomplished? What has James accomplished? What has Hunter Biden accomplished? What have I accomplished? It's just interesting. We have a great conference that has international implications for cooperation and work around the world to promote, God-ordained civilizations and such, and it's not even touched, or it's just mocked with ridicule. In this case, they act like these guys are rock stars, and they met, and by golly, we got to be ringside for the rock stars, right?
Well, the media can certainly give people an inflated amount of influence, which is not to say necessarily that Nick does not have influence. He does. I mean, I would say
for
that,
what, though, James?
Well, I'll give you one example of something that he verifiably has had an impact in, and that was all of the pressure that his people who watch his show were able to put on turning points back several years ago, prior to or right around the time of the Trumpian era coming into being. And I think that there was...
So Nick Fuentes got kicked out of the TP USA event back in the day, and then he basically held his own kind of vigil outside in the street and got a big crowd. And our buddy Casey Whalen on the Beat Crew team literally covered that very detailed video event outside of the TP USA event, James. So Liberty News Radio and our team was on scene for that even.
He would always have the rump conferences wherever Kirk was having his event every year, but they were able to put pressure. The online world was able to, through constant engagement, I think, move some of these people over closer to their issues, and that's not nothing. So I mean, everybody, you can certainly put some things that he's done that have had an impact, but mostly he's a showman, and stuff like this is, I mean, I'll be interested to see what they actually talked about. But, I will say this, and there is some contrarianism that runs in his commentary when you can tune in on any given night and not really know what side he's on certain evenings. That's always interesting to me.
Well, it's always interesting to me, too, that how does Nick Fuentes get Hunter Biden's phone number or vice versa? I can't get either of their numbers very easily. It's interesting to me how all these, so-called in people, whatever you want to call them, they seem to be able to get a hold of each other. Somebody wants to reach out to Donald, no problem. Donald wants to reach out to no problem. Nick wants to reach out to no problem. Hunter Biden wants to reach out, no problem. They can get a hold of anybody they want to, it seems like, and we can't get a hold of any of these people, really.
I don't know about that, Sam. I mean, you had just about every Trump surrogate in the book on, especially during that first campaign. We had Don Jr. on.
Yeah, that's when Trump needed to get elected. Now he doesn't need us, doesn't care, can't do it anymore, see?
Well, I mean, you just
mentioned,
you mentioned our conference last year. I mean, look at the star power that was in that room. But, I mean, the thing is, we're able to have these conferences because we do them covertly, and it's very much a well-run operation, so they don't get canceled. But, I mean, there was a lot of elected officials and expiring elected officials. We still got one candidate in the field whose candidacy came about as a result of that conference, and there was a lot of cross-pollination and different groups and organizational leaders all working together in greater capacities as a result of that conference. So, and again, some people we had there, I certainly can't think of any other right-of-center conference in the last
you're right
couple
about
of
that.
decades that had that sort of mix in it that as we had. And I mean, I don't know, we've had a lot of big names on.
Once in a while, lightning strikes and the stars align. I just interviewed a senator from the parliament in Austria, a nice lady. Just interviewed her, etc. So you're right. We had Jake Lang on. That interview just got released from Freedom Fest. So yes, it's true. We get great interviews from time to time, but the stars have to align.
Well,
now the reason I say Hunter Biden is trying to get coverage in the news, and the Nick Fuentes, what you do, James, usually these people create these, I don't know what you call them, unholy alliances, where let me explain what you do. You get two people that are about the same level in the media. and then they create some fiasco or some scenario that then launches both of their careers. Alex Jones and Glenn Beck were about like that, and they fought, and then now both of them were made more popular. Now you got Nick Fuentes, Hunter Biden doing the same thing. You had Donald Trump Jr. and what's that guy's name that's married to Chrissy Teigen? John
Legend.
They went to college together, and so they had a battle boosting their careers. And so what you got to do, James, and what I got to do is we got to find somebody that we can just have some weird scenario with, and then it'll launch our careers to the next level. See, that's how they do it.
I would say, frankly, Sam, you're probably understating the impact of what you've been able to do with this network. And I would say, frankly, my career is exactly where I would want it to be in terms of effectiveness, dollar for dollar and pound for pound. I mean,
you don't want to roll into the CNN red carpet anymore, James. Come on.
Well, I used to be a CNN contributor for a very short-lived time, about 20 years ago. But here's the thing about what I wanted to do with radio. As you know, every single market across the country has their own local conservative radio host, and his job every day is to read the GOP press releases, and he sees himself, he fantasizes about becoming the next Sean Hannity or the next Rush Limbaugh. And these people across the country in every city, they can get on actors and celebrities and entertainers and politicians, but I mean, what are they actually accomplishing other than giving generic lines of questionings to canned responses?
It's kind of like what Nick and Hunter accomplished.
I've never really got into
they
just
battle
going
against
after
MAGA, or they're for MAGA, but they're on either side, and they just kind of battle in their echo chamber, their blogosphere, whatever it is, and they just kind of do their deal, and hey, they get a paycheck, right?
Well, I mean, again, with that is, I mean, I'm more curious about Hunter Biden's angle in that than Fuentes. I mean, Nick is there to just generate
and he'll take any
attention
interview he can get
and outrage, and it's not to say that I don't agree with some of the things he says, but he does contradict himself a lot. I've never watched a full Nick Fuentes show, so I can't say I'm necessarily the authority on that, but from time to time when you see things trending or clicking or being reposted back when I was on social media, sometimes it would seem a little bit contradictory, but And I think you could see an arc where Nick Fuentes becomes a Democrat in the very near future. You saw that with Richard Spencer, who was basically the template for what Fuentes is now in some ways. And I knew Richard very well.
Yeah, and then he kind of spun out of control and very strange stuff. Well, there's another twist in the media. Again, we're always at the helm of these things. I mentioned Casey Whalen, our dear friend and partner, covered the Nick Fuentes interview outside of TPUSA when he held kind of a vigil outside when he got kicked out and everything else. We're really strangely at the crossroads of so many news stories at Liberty News Radio and what we do. It's not even funny. Hunter Biden now wins $1.7 million in a defamation suit against our dear friend Patrick Byrne. He was the ex-Overstock CEO, and I guess there's false bribery claims. So Hunter Biden secured $1.7 million, and Patrick Byrne, they say, falsely accused Hunter Biden. They said he orchestrated an $800 million deal with Iran, and the federal court in California ruled that Burns had knowingly made false statements with the intent to damage Biden's reputation. The judgment includes $1.7 million in punitive damages, and then they say, and additional sanctions. I'd like to dig into that and learn what that means. But he failed to, give credible evidence, they say, and he failed to show up at the jury trial. And so that's the allegations or the conviction there against Patrick Byrne. What I find interesting about this, James, is I don't trust the courts as far as I can throw it. This is one where I would say Donald Trump and company need to look into these judges, and judges may need to be impeached because, again, how can they say that you're a leader of the KKK when it's not factually true? But yet Aesop's Fables, so yes, we can do whatever we want. But yet then Patrick Byrne can't say that Hunter Biden was involved in a scheme with Iran and have his opinion on that. We're starting to see the Alex Jones go down. We're seeing this host and that host penalized. Now we're seeing Patrick Byrne can't say what he wants to say. These are serious freedom of speech violations in my mind. Sandy Hook, you talk about that, and you go on and go, where do we go from here? It's one thing to have an opinion, but it was literally considered what? Defamation suit. But yet you can't win one, but Hunter can. And how much evidence did Patrick Byrne ever even get to deliver in the case? Maybe he didn't show up because he knew it was just a sham and he was going to lose anyway. I mean, I don't know. I just find the whole thing very strange. But Hunter gets two huge stories virtually in his favor right now. He's on the opposite side of Nick, and he beat Patrick Byrne.
When you mentioned Patrick Byrne earlier this week, I was thinking Gary Byrne. Now, this is another example, and I'll touch on this story specifically, but this is just another example. Now, Gary Byrne, we met originally at the 2016 Republican National Convention, where we were broadcasting live the week that Trump became the nominee for the first time.
Sam sat in the CNN booth and everything, man. It was great.
And Gary Byrne, see, this is a guy we still stay in touch with. By the way, as a matter of fact, when you had the Butler Pennsylvania attempted assassination or apparent attempted assassination of Trump, we called Gary Byrne. We had Gary Byrne on the radio that night. And Gary Byrne, if people don't know, was a former Secret Service agent in the White House during the Clinton administration. He was on Clinton's personal protective Oval Office detail right there inside. And he wrote a book, of course, about his time in the Secret Service with Bill and Hillary, and became a big bestseller. And anyway, so I mean that's just one example of when you have a need to have a Secret Service agent, you get a pretty famous one here on this network. But no, this is a terrible thing with what happened to Patrick Byrne, of no relation, Overstock CEO. I was reading the notes here. The federal court in California ruled that Byrne had knowingly made false statements with the intent to damage Biden's reputation. Well, this again
goes back. That's exactly what they did to you, James.
I got to be able to say that I can speak with authority and from experience, having gone through the legal system in a somewhat similar way. Now, in my situation, I was the plaintiff, and we had filed a libel lawsuit against the Detroit News for alleging that I was the leader of the Ku Klux Klan. Now, this came after you and I had interviewed Donald Trump Jr. on Liberty Roundtable back on Super Tuesday of 2016, the biggest moment in Trump's career up until that point. And the media was just going nuts that Trump Jr. had given that interview. And when the normal slurs didn't work out, the Detroit News thought they would up the ante and just say, well, he was talking to the leader of the Ku Klux Klan. Well, that's just a totally false statement. And when you live in a place like I do, Memphis, with a sizable black community, you certainly don't want word getting out there that you're the leader of the Klan, right? So we filed a lawsuit.
And it was, especially when it's not even the truth. It's not true.
Well, it's not true at all, and not even a member, much less the leader. But it was dismissed out of hand in the lower court, so we appealed to the Michigan Court of Appeals. We went through the state court rather than the federal court, which may have been an error. But in any event, a panel of 3 judges published a decision that basically rewrote defamation law in the state of Michigan in my defeat. And they said, yes, it's true that he's not a member of the Klan, and it's also true that this is the textbook definition of libel according to the Restatement of Torts. But Aesop's Fables tells us that we must judge a man by the company he keeps. So therefore, you can say that somebody is the leader of the Klan if you want to, and that's free speech. Now, what they were saying in the company he keeps thing was 2 people that they mentioned, both very good friends of mine. I have no problem saying that. One is an attorney in Atlanta who I think in the 70s, before I was born, at one point in his career had a defendant who was a member of the aforementioned organization. And then the second is David Duke, who in the 70s was the same. But of course, since then, Duke had been elected in the 90s to the state legislature in Louisiana. He also went on to become the Republican nominee for governor and the Republican nominee for United States Senate. But before I was
weird.
born,
you can hang out with Robert Byrd and you're okay back in the day, and he was a big, and no harm, no foul for those guys. But if you happen to associate with any of these people, then somehow you're guilty as charged. And what I find fascinating about that is, what about this Hunter Biden thing? Have we even really dug into it and got to the facts? Did we even let Patrick Byrne bring his information forward? Because his dad literally said publicly that he was going to force them or, hold money hostage and everything else. And Hunter Biden had all kinds of dealings that we never really got to the bottom of. I was hoping that Kash Patel somebody over at the CIA and some Trump leaders were going to get to the bottom of that when they got the chance. But, of course, leave Hillary alone and leave Hunter alone, I guess, is the mantra from the administration, James.
Well, I hate to see people who appear to be on the right side of issues and pulling in a good direction, saddled with things like this, $1.7 million plus sanctions plus whatever, and for what? For saying something that he, and how do you know that he knowingly said something that was false for the express intent of damaging Biden's reputation? I mean, first of all,
you become the thought police, James.
The guy is known for being like a crack addict and a bum. I mean, if you say, what do you know about Hunter Biden? What I would say is, the laptop, drug addiction,
lying about getting a woman pregnant and saying he's not the dad, and DNA proves he lied. And then
right? getting paid money from all of these deals as a result of
international scandals with foreign powers and everything else. And you can't touch this guy though, right? I mean, he got pardoned by Joe, and now he's good. Now he's going to rebuild his reputation on the backs of Fuentes and Byrne, right?
Well, I am still interested to see exactly what they talk about.
Call Nick, tell him we'll have him on and we'll talk about it. See what he talks about. But if you want to get a hold of Hunter, you can have Hunter on too. We can have them both on.
No, I mean, Hunter Biden is interesting to me. I think it's interesting.
Thought we'd get you on Liberty Roundtable tomorrow. Does that work for you?
You had both of Trump's sons on, the sitting president, so why couldn't you get a former president's son on? So it's not beyond the realm of possibility, especially if
maybe I could say,
Nick.
Hunter, why don't you and your dad come on? Bring Jill on too. We just have to make a family affair out of this thing. All right. Anyway, congressional approval of Trump's corporate investments threatens free market principles, writes Ron Paul. Ron Paul attacking President Trump in a controversial move. President Trump's administration has invested $27 billion into private companies. It's a policy that Ron Paul is kind of saying, hey, this is a problem. They're doing it through the NDAA kind of thing, and they're saying, hey, you know what, we got to take over, have the government buy a stake in these companies that relate to military capabilities and hardware and everything else. This provision authorizes the Pentagon to use substantial funds for acquiring ownership in these companies. And it's been criticized by Ron Paul now in an article that Ron wrote, saying, hey, this isn't seen as socialism necessarily, but as corporatism, wherein the government wants to influence or control these private held companies. This represents a shift from free market ideals and may set a precedent for future expansion of government control into the private sector, messing with the free market system. James, what do you say to that allegation by Ron Paul?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably some credence to it, to be honest with you. I don't have too much on this one, but except to say that there has been a lot of, and I say this still as somebody who, if you had to put me on one side or the other, we won't go into degrees of enthusiasm, but I would still say that overall, a lot of our issues have been advanced, even if inadvertently, in the Trumpian era. So I will still stick to that. But a lot of his business dealings and that of his family are certainly a little bit shady. And wasn't it even, I mean, of course, you could just say it was a joke, and Trump is the ultimate showman, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But basically
they say
saying
Trump's made about $2 or $3 billion personally through a lot of these deals and crypto and who knows what. He comes in like everybody else. Well, this time he came in rich and left richer. Most come in poor and leave rich, right?
Well, he said basically, I think, again, it could have been a joke. I heard the music. How are we already 30 minutes into this? Anything my sons are investing in, you should get on that. I guess that's sort of like a wink and a nod that, yeah, we know. We know what's going to be good and what's
you're
good.
You're just not following Junior well enough, buddy. Hey, there you have it. Wow. Time flies when you're having fun. James Edwards with me, ladies and gentlemen. ThePoliticalCesspool.org. Check out his award-winning broadcast, book, and more every Saturday night live and or anytime at your fingertips. ThePoliticalCesspool.org. I'm Sam Bushman. We're everywhere. God save our constitutional republic.